Hello students, welcome to this audiovisual presentation on conceptual framework of universal design for learning and differentiated instruction. As we delve deep into the inclusive education approaches and practices, we need to know the two key components of it. To know the components, let us take the overview. Over time, we came to understand that learning involves specific challenge in the area to be learned, and so for it to occur, we have to eliminate unnecessary barriers without eliminating the necessary challenges. Thus, the UDL principles go deeper than merely focusing on physical access to the classroom, that is the universal design. They focus more on access to all aspects of learning. This is an important distinction between universal design for learning and a pure access orientation. This slide provides us a thorough conceptual framework of the two sub-concepts, universal design and universal design for learning. These two key concepts actually promote inclusive classrooms. The left hand side is the universal design, as you can see, and the right hand side denotes the universal design for learning. Universal design beckons for physical environment, whereas UDL beckons for instructional environment. It is the physical barriers which may exist in our architecture environment, and in case of UDL we find learning barriers may exist in our curricular environment. So the key factor is the physical factor and the curricular factors. We have in UD the proactive design of physical space, and in case of UDL we have proactive design of curriculum and instruction. In case of UD we find physical retrofitting can be costly and often inelegant, whereas in UDL it goes for instructional accommodations that can be time consuming and difficult to implement. Under these consequences, let us now discuss the concept of UDL. UDL focuses on the ability of teachers to meet the diverse learning needs of all students, even those with impairments that affect their mobility, vision, hearing, and learning. Teachers must recognize that there are multiple and flexible ways of providing effective instruction while adhering to curricular standards and objectives. Well, thanks to the technology, universal design enables students to respond to and interact with curricula and achieve learning standards. Now, universal design for learning, as we come across, basically rests on three basic principles. The principle 1 calls for support recognition learning, provide multiple flexible methods of representation. Principle 2 encircles to support strategic learning, provide multiple flexible methods of expression and apprenticeship. And principle 3 calls for to support affective learning, provide multiple flexible options for engagement. So the three key words that we get here are the method of presentation or representation, method of expression and apprenticeship, that is working, and the methods of engagement. Now, with UDL, learners are engaged in their own education, learning at greater breadth and depth, achieving at higher levels and motivated to continuing learning. That is, this is on the part of the learner. Now, teaching effectively in classrooms with diverse student needs, spending more time on instruction and facilitating learning and helping all learners succeed. I repeat, all learners succeed. This is on the part of the teacher or educator. Let us have a glimpse of this slide wherein we find that UDL applies to the whole curriculum. As you can see, it actually delineates the goals of education or teaching, learning, instruction. Then comes the proper instruction in which the UDL has to be implemented. Then comes the materials. The materials that actually are built or rest on the inclusive teaching learning strategies. And of course, in order to assess this kind of learning, it should have a universal design of assessment. Now, since we are talking about universal design of learning, and as we have already spelled before, the universal design, it is actually the physical background of a universal design of learning. And universal design of learning, while implementation in the day-to-day classroom practices, undergoes numerous barriers. So, in this video, we will have a quick survey of the potent barriers to universal design of learning. Our next concept of this discussion will be differentiated instruction. Now, what it is? It is another similar concept. Not all students are alike is the key word and the slogan of differentiated instruction. Based on this knowledge, differentiated instruction applies an approach to teaching and learning that gives students multiple options for taking in information and making sense of ideas. Differentiated instruction is a teaching theory based on the premise that instructional approaches should vary and be adapted in relation to individual and diverse students in classrooms, as said by Tomlinson. We take a quick video look in order to understand the basic conceptual framework of differentiated instruction.
Diversity has become a defining feature of Alberta's classrooms. Students come to school with a wide range of interests and abilities, and diverse learning strengths and needs, including students with disabilities. Differentiated instruction is a philosophy that acknowledges that students learn at different rates and in many different ways. Differentiated instruction benefits students because it promotes an environment in which learning differences are not just tolerated, they are valued. Carol Ann Tomlinson, one of the early advocates of this approach, describes differentiation as shaking up what goes on in the classroom so that students have multiple opportunities to explore concepts, make sense of ideas, and demonstrate what they know and understand. Differentiated instruction can take many forms. For example, teachers can provide materials and learning tasks at different levels of challenge, or provide different levels of support in the classroom, depending on student needs. When done effectively, differentiated instruction is a seamless part of everyday instructional planning and classroom practice. It is woven throughout the school day and informs how physical space of the classroom is organized, what learning resources are used, how instruction is planned and delivered, how student learning is assessed. The very nature of differentiated instruction means that it will look very different in every learning environment, depending on the students, teachers, and learning contexts. Differentiated instruction begins with knowing who students are as learners. Effective differentiation also depends on knowing how and when to use multiple instruction strategies so that students have opportunities to learn in multiple ways. Ongoing classroom assessment is also key to differentiated instruction. Assessment informs instructional planning and provides snapshots of what students understand and can do. Another hallmark of differentiated instruction is the use of flexible groupings. With flexible groupings, students are grouped and regrouped over the course of the school day and throughout the school year. Typical groupings include whole class instruction, small group instruction, one-to-one instruction, peer teaching pairs, partner learning, independent learning activities, cooperative small group learning. This flexible way of organizing groups allows for targeted small group instruction with students who share similar learning needs, interests, or learning preferences. It is essential that group membership be flexible and ever-changing to allow students to work with different peers in a variety of situations. Students need opportunities to work in group settings that they are comfortable with, as well as those that challenge them to learn and grow. Differentiated instruction can enhance a teacher's ability to reach all learners. Research shows that differentiated instruction can particularly benefit students with disabilities, English language learners, students who are gifted, students considered at risk for not completing school. A differentiated approach builds on evidence-based practices in an intentional and systematic manner, and differentiated instruction allows teachers to provide the best learning experience for all students in their classroom. For more information on supporting every student, visit the Alberta Education website.
Now, while going through these two basic concepts or the potent concepts of inclusive education, one question arises, then what is the difference or similarities or commonalities between universal design for learning and differentiated instruction? So, frequent questions about the commonalities between differentiated instruction and universal design for learning have prompted the examination of these two frameworks. Now, let us fix our eyes to these commonalities or differences or similarities. The left hand side we have DI and the right hand side we have UDL, as you can see. Well, the left hand side says a proactive approach that responds to specific student assessment information regarding students' readiness, interests and learning preferences, whereas right hand side calls for a proactive approach that designs flexible goals, methods, strategies and assessments by anticipating the full range of learner needs from the outset, that is from the very beginning. Now, the goal of DI is to provide a responsive and optimal learning environment to maximize achievement for all learners, whereas UDL's goal is to eliminate unnecessary barriers to learning in order to increase student achievement. In DI, a compilation of educational theories and practices related to effective teaching and student achievement is the foremost, whereas in UDL, we find it is inspired by the universal design concept actually of architecture, which is actually the UD part, and product development, and based on educational research regarding learners' varied response to instruction. So by now we have a clear idea of the difference between or commonalities or similarities between the differentiated instruction and the universal design for learning. Now, what can we deduce from this commonalities? We can deduce UDL and differentiated instruction are without a doubt similar concepts that share many of the same goals, ideas about learning and even classroom practices. However, that is not to say they are synonymous. The two differ in a few key aspects of their guiding principles, although we believe that they can work together and complement one another in a successful classroom. So, in order to make a classroom successful, we need these two concepts together working hand in hand. Now, with the conceptual framework of differentiated instruction and universal design for learning, which actually completes the inclusive education classroom, is somewhat like this. So, putting the whole lecture together, we find the following key points. Putting it together, we find differentiated instruction, although somewhat still developing in educational settings, has received significant recognition. When combined with the practices and principles of universal design for learning, practice to appropriately challenge the broad scope of students and in classrooms today. Although educators are continually challenged by the ever-changing classroom profile of students, resources and reforms, practices continue to evolve and the relevant research base should grow, and along with them grows the promise of differentiated instruction and UDL in educational practices.